Prominent Hong Kong activist Joshua Wong has been taken into custody after pleading guilty to inciting and organizing an unauthorized assembly. He was charged for his part in the dramatic siege of police headquarters last year during the city's mass protests. Bloomberg News' Ian Marlowe is following the case for us in Hong Kong. Ian, talk us through what happened in court.
Yeah, so Joshua Wong is one of Hong Kong's most prominent pro-democracy activists, ended up pleading guilty to inciting an unauthorized assembly today for a case relating back to a protest during the height of Hong Kong's protests last year in June, where hundreds of protesters surrounded the police headquarters in a downtown area. So that event was extremely prominent in Hong Kong, and they ended up getting charged as a result of that. So he's pled guilty to being part of inciting that rally, that unauthorized protest, but pled not guilty to knowingly participating in that rally, because at the time I think a lot of people thought that it sort of occurred sort of organically, but as one of the leaders who ended up addressing the crowd, he was charged as being kind of one of the masterminds of that.
We've seen a number of pro-democracy activists and lawmakers being arrested or sentenced these past few weeks. What kind of message is the Hong Kong government trying to send here?
It's obvious that the government is fully pushing through and sort of relentlessly pursuing charges and cases related to the protests of last year, and is also not stopping there, and is pushing forward and launching new charges, new arrests, and and police actions related to things not just from the unrest and the protests, but things that happened in the Legislative Council, things that sitting lawmakers had done. The government is sort of pushing through these prosecutions, and in some cases, I mean, you had almost 10,000 protesters getting arrested last year. So there's a lot of court cases being pushed through the system. And this case relates to an event in June, but there's other cases over the summer that still haven't been gotten to yet. And I think the message from the government is clear. If you did something last summer at the protests and we have any sort of evidence at all, we're going to come after you. And I think the police are sort of slowly, as the unrest sort of dwindled with COVID and with the national security law that was invoked here, the police have been freed up to kind of go through some of this CCTV footage and pursue all these cases and gather evidence for prosecutors.
And what has been the reaction internationally then?
On the Joshua Wong case, there's been some pro-democracy groups that have come out and condemned these events. I mean, a lot of pro-democracy groups, and U.S. lobby groups see this as just he was part of a protest. The protests are legal in Hong Kong generally. Around that time, a lot of protests weren't authorized technically by the police, but Hong Kongers, unlike people in mainland China, are guaranteed freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. So they view this as a sort of legitimate expression of dissent against the government. And the government says, we didn't approve this rally. You threateningly surrounded the police headquarters, and you clearly addressed the crowd, and we're gonna go after you.
So then what will all this mean to social activism going forward?
I think in Hong Kong, you just have a situation now where any sort of political activism, social activism that was quite common before, particularly became very prominent during the protests and the earlier 2014 umbrella movement protests, which Joshua Wong actually led. I think all of that becomes, if not very difficult, entirely impossible. Hong Kong is a place where protests were quite common before, and some people in the police and government say that that right to protest will not go away. But at the moment, in the middle of all these social distancing restrictions and with the national security law still fresh and kind of vaguely defined, and some people are just not sure what falls afoul of this law. So at the moment, any sort of protest or any sort of activism is fraught, and a lot of people have gone into exile or disbanded the political groups that they were a part of before. To make sure that they don't fall afoul of this law.